Great.
Perfect. Okay, so I'll go ahead and get started. I'm going to give a fairly high-level overview of the ML-based optimization and control efforts that we've had ongoing for many years now at SLAC's Accelerators. I'll focus primarily on optimization rather than related efforts like trying to improve our online modeling infrastructure to simulate the accelerator. And I'll discuss a little bit of our efforts on RL. Oh, it won't let me advance the slides, so let me try sharing again. Sorry about that.
Who writes the letter to Bill?
Okay, are you able to see my presentation still?
Yes.
Okay, great. So at LCLS, which is one of the main accelerators at SLAC, we serve a variety of different photon science users. So these are folks that come in and want to look at various samples with different properties, and to provide that light, we have to adjust the beam parameters. So we end up adjusting things like beam duration, the wavelength, and a variety of other aspects of the beam. In practice, this ends up being quite a complicated problem. In particular, we're often adjusting the detailed position, momentum, phase space of the beam, and we have incomplete information. So we're able to access the 2D projections of the beam at various points along the accelerator, but ultimately we're trying to piece together information about the beam from these limited diagnostics. The accelerator is long. We have hundreds of variables to control, and we're also upgrading the facility. We're in the process of doing that now to the point where there will be many millions of parameters to monitor. The one particular feature of this particular accelerator is that there are a lot of different operating modes requested by different users, and the machine is in very high demand. So there's a lot of pressure to tune up the accelerator to these very different operating points in a minimum amount of time. On top of that, increasingly, users are wanting to dynamically control the beam during experiments. So, for instance, on the fly, adjusting the separation between two pulses or adjusting their energy separation. We also, although we sometimes treat this as though it's a black box system to be optimized, there are a number of time-dependent behaviors. So things like the trajectory feedback are constantly running in the background. There's cooling that has sort of minutes to hours cycles that end up affecting the system response. And then there's also a slower distribution shift over time as things that are on the accelerator change slowly. For instance, the efficiency with which the initial drive laser is converted over into electrons, that shifts slowly over time. So we ultimately have a variety of optimization and control needs. We want to push the beam into very new regions of parameter space that haven't been achieved before. So things like very short, highly compressed beams, which requires a lot of time to set up. We want to be able to customize the beam very rapidly for different users. And then once we've done that, we want to be able to maintain stability for experiments with very tight tolerances. And then, as I mentioned, increasingly, we're wanting to actively scan the beam parameters during an experiment. So we ultimately, at SLAC, decided that we were going to try to take a variety of tuning approaches to tackle this problem. Ultimately, these leverage different amounts of data and different amounts of information about the machine. And so our approach essentially was to start first with algorithms that have minimal data overhead, and then slowly build up to the more data intensive and model formed approaches. So in practice, what this means is that we spent a lot of initial time focused on Bayesian optimization and improvements, and now we're moving more towards incorporating additional system model information and moving more towards deep reinforcement learning. We also, I should add, spent quite a bit of time building up our online modeling infrastructure. So now we have tools set up to be able to deploy physics models and also ML-based surrogates for faster execution online during operation with the machine, which also plays into our strategy going forward. So I mentioned that we've had a lot of success with Bayesian optimization. We've also spent a lot of time making improvements to BO. So this is just some of the applications that we've applied it to. One of them is the FEL pulse intensity. This we've used with BO quite a bit, and also started to explore incorporating things like correlations from physics models into. We've also addressed things like magnetic hysteresis with BO. So in this case, we applied a simple differentiable physics simulation for the hysteresis process in conjunction with the Gaussian process model, and folded that into BO and found that we were able to get much higher precision optimization when we did that. So this solves a very long-standing problem across the accelerator field with dealing with magnetic hysteresis while trying to tune. We also have applied BO to things like the longitudinal phase space of the accelerator. So this is the time energy distribution of the beam. And then we also have put together multi-objective Bayesian optimization, which has the advantage of giving you the ideal parameter trade-off called Pareto front between parameters online for a real machine, which in the past people have done by repeated single objective optimization. This allows you to do it much more quickly and much more efficiently. We've also applied BO to other types of photon side signals, like the monochromator, which gives a measure of the energy distribution of the beam and intensity of the shots. And we've also used BO with learned output constraints to do things like optimize the LCLS2 injector emittance while keeping the dark current low. Now we're moving more toward combining larger physics model information with BO. So we're doing this primarily because we want to be able to scale up to higher dimensional tuning problems. And we also want to be able to adjust the accelerator as quickly as possible without excursions into regions of parameter space that aren't as useful. And so we've started using system models. Sometimes these are neural net surrogates, but you could also use any number of just fast executing simulations to do this, and using that as prior information to the Gaussian process that's used in BO. And we see that even when we don't have totally accurate models, for instance, in this middle plot, this is showing a model that's used as a prior, and then also a model that's being used as an optimization test case. And you can see they don't match that well. However, you still get a performance boost in BO that's fairly significant in contrast to standard BO, which is shown in the bottom here in blue. We've also used a modified version of BO, which uses a acquisition function that's targeted for information gain to characterize systems efficiently. So it's often the case that accelerator physicists will spend a lot of time doing ND parameter scans in order to characterize a new system. with this approach, we're able to adjust a larger number of variables and also add constraints. So we were able to specify that we want to avoid combinations of settings that have too high of a beam phase space area, for instance. And this handles all of that automatically. And it ends up being about 8 times faster to do it this way than by hand for this case on this injector system. Another nice feature of this is that you end up with a data distribution that is very nice for subsequent learning. So for instance, in this case, we ran the algorithm while looking at scalar parameters that give an approximation of the beam size. But then we were able to record all the images and from the data train a surrogate model that predicts the full distribution output. So this type of cycle between efficient exploration of systems and then coupling that into a more comprehensive online modeling of those systems is something that we're wanting to do at larger scale. Because of the time lost trying to share the screen, I'll go more briefly through these slides. But essentially, we've now put these algorithms into open source software tools that we use pretty broadly for online optimization. We have a lot of housed in XOpt, which is a Python interface to these algorithms. And then we have a user interface that also handles I/O with the accelerator. And between the two of these, we've used online optimization, including Bayesian optimization at a variety of different facilities. This is just more detail and examples on that, so I'll skip it since we lost some time at the beginning. We also, as I mentioned, have put a lot of work into our online modeling infrastructure. So we've started to do things like combine visualization with warm starts from online physics models. So this is an example from the LCLS2 injector conditioning, where we have a particle tracking code impact, which has all of the nonlinear collective effects that are relevant for modeling injector systems included. And we were able to run that reading live from the accelerator, sending it to our local HPC system, and then displaying the information back in the control room. So this allowed physicists to do some intuitive hand tuning while looking at parameters that aren't directly visible on the accelerator. And then after they were happy with their hand adjustment of settings, we were able to bring it over to Bayesian optimization to do further fine tuning. And the combination of these two things resulted at the time in the best emittance that they had yet obtained during LCLS2 injector commissioning. So this is a nice example, I think, of how online physics modeling combined with tuning algorithms can help improve the overall tuning experience quite a bit. So that was a lot of Bayesian optimization described, but we want reinforcement learning too. Why is that? We started off with BO because it's very useful for tuning and characterizing new systems from scratch. It's also sort of intuitive how you incorporate learned output constraints or safety constraints. And then there are a number of tricks that one can use to increase the conversion speed and the ability to handle higher dimensional systems. However, we're interested in using RL to address a slightly different set of needs. We find that increasingly we're wanting to use more of the global machine information to try to aid faster setups, and then also account for changes that occur over time. Essentially, we'd like an algorithm able to interpolate in the very high dimensional space of the accelerator. It's also, in some cases, sensible to treat this tuning process as a dynamical system. This might aid fine control and setup. We see in the FEL response, for instance, a lot of behavior that seems in some cases correlated with things like the orbit feedback responses. And then, as I mentioned, there are also these slower processes like the central cooling system that also can affect FEL output. And there's a lot of time-dependent structure, as you can see in this video here, in the FEL response. And so it'd be interesting to see if we can capture some of that better with RL. With BO, we end up essentially averaging out all of these fluctuations, and the process is a little bit slower. We also want to be able to address these cases where users want very precise dynamic control over the beam, and that's something that we can't really do with BO because of how it jumps around the parameter space while trying to converge. And then all of the usual things apply in our cases as far as why these problems are suitable for RL. We have these very large continuous state and action spaces. We have a lot of different multimodal signals, including images, spectra that we want to be able to combine as state information and also objectives. And then we have a lot of physics models and simulators for our cases, so there's a lot of opportunity to do offline training, as many others today have given examples of. To give a brief example of one of the early types of problems we were thinking of that shares some broad similarities with what we face at LCLS, but also one of our other accelerators, Facet 2. This is a small accelerator at UCLA that was setting up a round flat beam transform. And this transform is very sensitive. It's controlled with 3 quadrupoles, and then it's affected by upstream drift in the inputs, so things like the laser spot and the RF control of the gun. And so we, in 2019, wanted to explore different ways of accounting for this drift. So we trained a model, a neural network model from archived data, and tried to see if we could use that to just simply optimize quickly over the model online, given the drifting inputs, and then find decent solutions for the quadrupoles. And that worked fairly well, even under pretty substantial distribution shift over time. And then we explored using that as a warm start for other optimization algorithms, including BO and hand tuning, and also extreme seeking. And then the last thing that we did was compare to a simple DDPG agent. And the DDPG agent actually, once trained, converged the fastest and the most smoothly out of all of them. But there was a lot larger overhead and preparation, and so ultimately this contributed to why we sort of put the brake on investing further in RL at that moment in time, and continue to develop BO. So now we're moving back towards investigating RL again. We are starting to look at tuning the FEL pulse intensity with quadrupole magnets as a first example, in part because the system does respond so dynamically to small changes in things like the beam trajectory. And this initial problem includes around 28 or so focusing magnets. There are others that we could include. We could even add the steering for the trajectory control as part of it. Some of the RF parameters, the undulator taper. So it's a nice problem in terms of being able to start small and then scale up and add complexity. Later on, we may also want to include more of the photon beam diagnostics from downstream. So essentially what we're starting with is using data-driven surrogates. So this is an example on the bottom here of a surrogate model that's been trained on measured data and its agreement with predictions on the test set. So we can predict what's going on fairly well overall. And then we're also using differential simulations, including Cheetah and BMAD, to train agents. And along the way, investigating things like the learned model response. So if we use a variety of types of data, it's often not distributed very well for learning. So do we actually see reasonable quadrupole responses when we scan over the model? So we're kind of investigating training on data-driven surrogates and also physics simulations at the same time. And we expect that we'll have time quite soon, probably in the next few weeks. Oh, and I should add, this is a collaboration between SLAC, DAISY, and JLab. So this is, I think, a very exciting topic to work on together. In terms of the needs and opportunities concerning RL at SLAC, one of the things that we really need is uncertainty-aware and trust region RL. These accelerators are very, very sensitive to changes in parameters, and if we take a step too quickly, things like the trajectory feedbacks and shut off the machine. And then the parameter space, depending on how many variables you're adjusting, is also very strongly influenced the output parameters in a very coupled way. And so being able to explore part of the parameter space and then expand kind of the trusted region, as many trust region algorithms do, is something that would be very appealing. We also, as I mentioned, have this problem where even if we get, a good controller setup for one particular setup or type of setup, we have a lot of different configurations, including single bunch, double bunch. We have a variety of different beam energies. We're changing the beam duration, the shape of the longitudinal phase space. So there's a real need to have sample efficient adaptation across these various setups. In principle, there's no reason why that shouldn't be able to be done. It's just a lot of work that we haven't done yet, and could certainly use any ideas for a good algorithm to try for that. We also have a lot of interesting opportunities for transfer learning between different accelerators. The LCLS accelerator and the Facet 2 accelerator, both at SLAC, have very similar layouts. In fact, the injectors are the same component design, but they operate at very different charges. Facet is operating at around 2 nanocoulomb, and LCLS generally operates around 250 picocoulomb. So this could be very interesting. They have very similar sets of diagnostics on the accelerator side, and they both feed very sensitive experiments. Facet is feeding plasma-based acceleration experiments, where there's the additional problem of trying to then optimize acceleration through a plasma, which is very challenging to control and very sensitive to the upstream beam conditions. There are also interesting opportunities to have RL or other algorithms contribute to fundamentally new capabilities. So at Facet, for instance, one of the things that they're trying to support is this extreme beams research area, where they're creating highly compressed beams that are unprecedented in terms of the beam parameters, and that's very challenging to try to set up and control. They're trying to also measure very subtle differences between different versions of theory for some of the nonlinear collective effects involved. And so there's some fundamental beam science there to be done. And it will require very fine control over this accelerator. And then, as I mentioned, increasingly on the LCLS side of things, there are science users that want to be able to manipulate the beam in ways that we really haven't done before to enable new science. There's a lot of opportunity there. We also have quite comprehensive capability at this point for online system modeling. We spent a lot of effort trying to refine the way that we were building ML-based surrogates to get faster executing models that can combine information from some of the slower high-fidelity simulations and also measured data. We also have been looking into things like multi-fidelity optimization, multi-fidelity modeling to support some of that. And we also have some infrastructure put in place to do online physics simulations, including for quite detailed physics simulations that typically require being connected to high-performance computing. So there are a lot of opportunities there to combine online system modeling and RL. Another area that we've started looking into is human AI interaction. So there's some effort there to try to understand how accelerator operators make decisions, how we can enable human decision making, and also how can we get evaluative feedback from operators to help improve the tuning algorithms that we're deploying. And so there's some interesting opportunities there for RL with human feedback. And then finally, for the LCLS2 upgrade to LCLS, there will be a very high repetition rate beam, kilohertz to megahertz. And so there are a lot of opportunities to potentially investigate fast feedback, although we haven't explored that very much so far. And then just to give some idea of the broader picture, online tuning and RL and whatnot are just one part of the whole landscape of ML accelerators that we're pursuing at SLAC. So we have pretty strong programs in things like anomaly detection and failure prediction, online modeling and creation of digital twins, and then also ML enhanced diagnostics. There's actually a very strong effort for facet 2 in particular. They'll be relying on ML enhanced diagnostics to help them understand the behavior of beam shot to shot for their users. And so ultimately, we're wanting to stitch all of these technologies together to aid operation. Along with that, we've been putting together infrastructure to enable online high-fidelity physics simulations, combining that with adaptive ML models, having a comprehensive database of those various models so that it's easy to pull from those when we want to use model information to aid online characterization and tuning. And so this is something that we've been putting together, and we're making good progress towards having all of these pieces interconnected. It's very much a work in progress, but we're getting there. And I'll skip this for now, but this just summarizes some of the different open source software packages that we've been developing. We found that doing things in a modular way has been very helpful for being able to maintain and upgrade and add new features to these various software packages that are essentially divided cleanly along different tasks. So in conclusion, initially at SLAC, we focused a lot on Bayesian optimization and its improvements. We've used BO very broadly at SLAC. I should have highlighted it here. I'll add it to the slides that I upload. We, along with many collaborators, just recently published a survey of BO in accelerators, and this includes many of the improved techniques that help in trying to deploy BO on accelerator problems. And as part of that, we also have a variety of portable open source tools for optimization that we've developed. We're working on making these more generalizable as well. We're starting to work with Daisy and JLab to try to make XOpt and Badger more compatible with RL, for instance. And then, as I mentioned, we also had a lot of focus on infrastructure for online modeling. So a lot of that is in place and well established. And now we're returning to investigating RL. And in particular, we're concerned about dealing with time-dependent behavior, trying to explore these very large parameter spaces, trying to switch quickly between different setups, and also data. So with that, I'll end. This is a collection of people both at SLAC and elsewhere working on these problems together. Thank you for your attention, and if there's time, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thanks a lot, Auralee, for this very interesting talk. Maybe we... I would say that we take 2 questions maybe, and then we have to move on in the program because we're a bit delayed. So is there any question from the audience?
Yeah, because I'm new to this topic, like what is the, regardless of the presentation, what's the main research topic of this the accelerator she was presenting was? Is it like what part of particle physics? If it's particle physics, okay, great. The background.
Auralee, can you hear Benjamin?
It's a little bit hard to hear.
I'm also
exactly the use case. It's an X-ray source. Actually, not particle physics. It's for photon science. It's a wide range of stuff, like biology, geology, like high density physics. Yeah, you can study with X-rays basically. All very fast. Very
so lower frequencies of.
Sorry.
So lower frequencies of light radiation. Totally different use case.
So, yeah, totally different use case.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay, one more, or shall we move on? So get well soon, Auralee. Thanks a lot.